we recording. With the war on youth, essentially what we're looking at, right, is, I mean, historically, youth have been criminalized, right? Black youth, indigenous youth, youth of color, immigrant youth, queer youth, trans youth. And so what we're looking at really is how that continues to evolve. We know for the last few decades, the gang narrative has been used to target Black and Brown youth. And what we've seen is this transition and this very clear connection to using the violent extremist label or the terrorist label to continue that criminalization of youth. And within this, there's different programs we look at. So we have the umbrella program, which is CVE, Countering Violent Extremism. And within that, within that is the so CVE, sorry, excuse me, I got a little distracted there. So CVE is basically it's run by the Department of Homeland Security, and it essentially targets anybody critical of the U.S. government, right? And within that, there's the specific program we target, which is called PVE, Preventing Violent Extremism in Schools. And this program is run by the FBI, and it essentially has labeled different behaviors as potentially suspicious. And what they're claiming is that these behaviors are indicators that a young person is on a pathway to what they call radicalization, on a pathway to becoming a potential terrorist or violent extremist. And some of these behaviors that they essentially expect teachers to report on students, students to report on each other, counselors to report on students. And some of these behaviors are things such as being too much into your culture, expressing anger and frustration, being in poverty, being a migrant, right? So just a lot of aspects of youth identity, right? Who youth are. And the idea is, and they claim, right? The state claims that these are sort of methods of moving away from policing, right? And we know right now we are in this era of reform, right, where reform is being pushed, and we know that reform is just not going. It's just not it, right? It really is abolition. But of course, sort of reform being pushed as the police are being more criticized on the mainstream. So within that, these programs are really slipping their way more and more into our communities. The local version of this is called PATH, which is an LAPD run program. And PATH stands for Providing Alternatives to Hinder Extremism. So of course, co-opting our language of alternatives. And PATH falls under, and thank you, Akil, right, for putting those acronyms, because these are these constant alphabet soup. And PATH falls under the larger program known as TVTP, which is Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention. And so the city, right, and of course, contrary to immense community pressure against it, the city passed a grant, and now this grant is going to this LAPD PATH program, where essentially they have a team of really 500 plus informants, right, snitches made up of teachers, counselors, faith leaders, really people who work with youth. And the idea is, of course, to report on youth. Of course, it's phrased in this, it's support, it's not police monitoring, it's basically people monitoring each other, but we know it's still policing, right? And so these are programs, right, we've been building against and we've been fighting against. And a few years back, the community youth managed to push the mayor, when Mayor Garcetti was there, to reject a grant, right? But of course, it still is being pushed. And so we see various things kind of manifesting. And now, like today, we're going to be talking about this app. And so this app is essentially reporting, right? Having even students report on each other, teachers report on students through this app. And one thing I wanted to add as well is that these programs are modeled off of a program in England called Prevent. And what Prevent did was, what Prevent does, excuse me, is it essentially is the same programs, but it's taken it to a much more intense level of mandated reporting, right? So anybody who works with you has to, by law, report these. And anyone who knows mandated reporting here, right, it's already really flawed, anti-Black, very racist. And so even though these behaviors that I listed, these programs don't include mandated reporting, we know that the US and England are very, and the United Kingdom are very tied together, right, ideologically. So I'll go ahead and just pause there, and we'll be going into some more detail. I just wanted to see if folks have any questions about these programs or comments, and feel free to unmute or put your hand up. And I see Pancake, you just joined us as well. Nice to see you here. So I'll go ahead. I'll just pause there, and of course, feel free as it goes if folks do have any questions. And I think we're gonna go into our discussion right now. Oh, yes, I could. Oh, I see that. Lara, I see you have your hand up. Go for it if you'd like to unmute.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all of that. That was really interesting information. I'm just curious, are private facilities, companies, organizations like requesting this and getting large sums of money, or what's like the monetary aspect of the whole game? I guess that's my question, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. It's essentially given through grants, right? So grants are given to whether it's nonprofits or like law enforcement, but basically they're given right from the Department of Homeland Security and other entities. Then the grants are given. So for example, like for the TVTP one, that was a grant that went then to the city of LA, right? To then implement the program in LA, which then trickles, of course, as we know, so much of the city's money then goes also to LAPD. So yes, it is in the form of essentially of grants. And like I said, a lot of like one of the big grant receivers is the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which more people more popularly know as the Museum of Tolerance, right? The Museum of Tolerance here in West LA. So yeah, so a lot of times it's not even law enforcement getting the grants. It's the who claim the sort of the groups who claim to be community organizations or nonprofits. And so, and for the most part, people are knowingly receiving these grants, but they are sometimes very worded in such a way. But really, once you look into it, it's pretty clear to see it's very policing, criminalizing, programs. Yeah. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Kind of to that question, Laura, about, what is the monetary incentive? I think a wider question might be, what is the objective behind these programs? And one is clearly, the continual targeting of Black, Muslim, Indigenous, immigrant youth that Nadia has been talking about. The other, I think, if we look at who's involved in facilitating these grants, they are Zionist nonprofits, right? So people whose objective is to expand and to strengthen the efforts to occupy Palestinian land. And so that pursuit of land, that solidifying and affirming the entity known as Israel, really, there's a lot of money tied to it for sure, but it's also just a continuation of that conquest. And Akhil, I don't know if you want to add to that some more, or...
Sure, and also we just have Celine that just joined from Palestinian Youth Movement. I don't know if Celine, if you would want, we just brought up the topic of, basically how these grants are monetized and who, yeah, I know, right? And what are some of the various organizations that have participated, that have received money. So the Simon Wiesenthal Center is a good example because they actually received a grant from both the state of California and the federal government, both in the name of fighting extremism. And then the ADL, as far as we know, they haven't received a grant directly, but they have participated as consultants on a few different CVE programs, including participating in the very original CVE conference as well in Boston and giving their input into how they helped to form the Boston CVE pilot program. And then another trend is we see grants going to supposed, Muslim community organizations as well, but ones that are oftentimes sort of like, what's the term, astroturf, to like, as if they represent Muslim society, but they actually often are normalizing with Zionist organizations and participating with collaborating with the police. An example is Muflehun, which received TVTP grants as well to work with the American Jewish Committee to actually train by so-called upstanders in reporting on extremism. So you see this kind of trend across the board, not just with Zionist organizations, but we actually have a community community organizations that helped the LAPD with the CVE pilot program slide. It's really interesting to see the various different communities of LA represented. And then Selena's comments in the chat, because her audio is not working. She's saying they pushed for more funding for CVE on a national level and the ADL. Is that what you're saying? And have held local CVE summits. The other group, the other entity that has profited a lot from CVE in terms of the profit motive is academics. So these grants don't just go to community organizations or nonprofits and police, they also go to academics to do research. And two that we have been tracking for a while here in the coalition they were originally contracted and paid by the Department of Homeland Security to evaluate the CVE program in LA and give their feedback on what went well, what didn't go well. One is at UCLA, his name is David Eisenman, and the other one is in Illinois, and his name is Stephen Wine. And one thing they recommended is these kinds of reforms of changing the name, not making it so explicitly about CVE, making it kind of more vague about violence prevention. And we noticed that that's exactly the way these programs have gone. So anyway, I'll pass it back to Nadia at this point, or Mantios.
Yeah, no, thank you, Akil. Yeah, and I was just thinking, I completely, forgotten in the moment of including academia, because that's really been, their role has been so key in state violence, right? And especially these programs. So kind of for the coalition as a whole and for the War on Youth, looking at academia and targeting the role that they have in supporting and really kind of being that sort of research, quote unquote, backing of these programs. So yeah. But yeah, so nothing to add. And yeah, thank you for naming that too, right, Celine? Having the local CVE summit as well. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Cool. I'll pass it on to you then, Matheus, or still for the app. Sorry.
Yeah,
app discussion.
yeah, I think we can talk about this internship we did and maybe tie in some stuff. Thank you for that, Nadia, and thanks folks for asking all those questions. Yeah, so we've I think the coalition, especially this group, recognizes that path is in play now. The city got that targeted violence and terrorism prevention grant, and so the LAPD's organizing in schools. A lot of that is in response to the organizing of groups like Students Deserve that got cops off school campuses, right? And was able to get the LAUSD to divest from school policing. And so recognizing that now that police are responding to that lack of their immediate presence within schools by deputizing educators, our focus has been kind of cultivating this culture of resistance and education and just organizing among youth themselves, right, independently. And so we've done that in a few ways. One is that we've been working with these 1st through 6th graders at STEAM to the Future, developing an organizing 101 curriculum. The other is we've just been talking to high schoolers, and we talked to a fantastic set of kids, or students, I should say, from Fairfax High School, primarily 10th through 12th graders from their Peace and Social Justice Club. And they're just dope. I know LA, we made that connection through LA Can's Human and Civil Rights group. Chris Vin, I want to shout him out there, who really set this up. And they're really a phenomenal group of students who actually were down to do an internship with us at the coalition / LA Can over their spring break, which was this past week. And it was really dope. We'd never really done anything like that with high school age students. Well, at least in my time there, Nadia and Akil, I don't know if we've done that in the past. I know we've had college age students, but I wanted to really quickly, and they may log on tonight, although I know this is kind of late for them. They may log on to talk a little bit about it, but I just want to go over some of the things we covered with them. And some of those things were, just getting acquainted with the different fights at LA Can. They actually came to LA Can and, spent a week there. And so getting down with Human and Civil Rights, Downtown Women's Action Coalition, the Food and Wellness Collective, the Urban Growers Committee. They got to spend time and talk with Shakir Rahman, our attorney at Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, who also had a very busy week because some of you might have heard we're being sued by the city. So they got to see all that kind of play out with the site. They got to review the Board of Police Commissioners meetings, really learn about how that oversight body functions, kind of talk about, they really got to witness firsthand the limitations put forth on public comment and kind of timeline when those limitations were put in place, and talked about why those limitations might be there. And so for folks that don't know, since 2020, the Board of Police Commissioners has set public comment to 45 minutes, and they've maintained that time limit for in-person meetings now that in-person meetings have resumed. They haven't gone back to how things have gone. Akil got to talk to the youth about these surveillance programs that they talked about. And then they also they got to work on some pop ed materials too around our robot dog stuff. But I think the most fascinating part about all this is learning from them about what surveillance monitoring, just the problems in their school are. And, we similarly talked about this idea of bringing cops back in school in different ways, which we at the coalition recognize as counterinsurgency, right? Softening the image of a police officer. We know that this is something we see at CSP sites, cops playing basketball with youth, coaching football teams, to give them access to youth. Similarly, these same youth at Fairfax High School have seen that. And I'd be curious if folks want to chime in. I'd never heard of this, but apparently there's a police magnet program at Fairfax High School. So it's literally a magnet program where the supplementary curriculum is that of policing. And so LAPD comes in. It's very similar to like an ROTC or JROTC, where they need to be groomed a certain type of way. So that's a facet we'd never really heard about. And the students actually brought up an event that kind of went down around the death of Tyree Nichols. And so folks might have heard of this. It involves a nonprofit called Building Blue Bridges, and the LAPD. They took high school students from Dorsey High School on a march across the 6th Street Bridge to honor Tyree Nichols, which is disgusting on its face. Here's a story Knock did about it. And the students didn't know that they were going to go be a part of something for the LAPD, a photo op. It's really disgusting. And, you know, at the end of it, students talked about how they were taken to LAPD headquarters and, you know, made to use a force simulator to reenact that trauma. And so this is just another example of, you know, this kind of counterinsurgent effort to get youth to buy into policing. These kids weren't having it. These students weren't having it in this article. And it was kind of dope to see that these Fairfax High School students were aware of that and were more so aware of kind of how fucked up it was. I'm just checking in with the chat here. Rebecca says, I know there was a police academy in North Hollywood for high schoolers. I wonder if it's morphed into magnet or charter schools. Yeah, I wonder too. I hadn't heard about anything quite like that. Okay, any questions about any of that? Okay, and I want to welcome the person who just hopped in. We're just talking about an internship we had this past week with Fairfax High School students. Another thing we touched on that we learned about from these students is, and apparently this is happening in other high schools, is there's been kind of a crackdown on bathrooms where the students had kind of described how, you know, the administration had identified bathrooms as a space where this type of deviant behavior takes place, whether it's vaping, like drinking or any other thing. And so the schools are actively closing down bathrooms and also just monitoring how long students take to get to restrooms. And so it's been a real concern for students trying to find bathrooms that they can use that are open, having enough time to use the restrooms. And, you know, it's something that's really pressing. And, you know, we found out with the students, we did some research on the matter, and apparently this is happening statewide in California. It's like the newest trend in school policing. So like I said, in Fairfax High School specifically, they lock a good number of the bathrooms on the floor, but also install cameras at the door of the restroom to see who's coming in, who's going out. And so this is, I mean, when we talked about it, it was clear to us that this is just another facet of, you know, what we described as crime prevention through environmental design, SEP10, shaping this environment to minimize criminality and describing the space, restrooms, like a public health need, something that's, you know, covered in the, I mean, we don't subscribe to the document, but the like list of view on human rights as something that's inherently criminal. And that's how they're describing it. And so the students created some pop-ed identifying that, you know, folks need restrooms for health reasons, period, right? And then the other, as in like they need restrooms full stop. And then the other component to that is, you know, a lot of the issues that these administrators are tying inextricably to restrooms can be addressed through other resources, right? So if it's bullying or fighting, maybe some type of mediation resource for students that's non-carceral, that's non-punitive. If it's substance abuse problems, resources to address that instead of, you know, the thousands of dollars on cameras and monitors being used to place right in front of the restrooms. And so that's another one of the things students have been working on. And so, you know, we think this is something we're going to try to repeat in the summer as well. And we, you know, we want to continue this relationship with the Peace and Social Justice Club at Fairfax High School. And hopefully they can hop on at some point during this call to talk a little bit about it. But I very quickly want to see if folks have any questions about that internship, about any of its components, some of the stuff we talked about. And then if there's anything y'all have heard about, policing or surveillance in LAUSD schools or just any schools around us that we should maybe pay attention to. Go for it, Nadia.
Hey, yeah, no, thanks for sharing that, Maxios. And as I shared earlier, I'm a teacher, and that's something even at my school, they've just really been cracking down on, or even just getting any teacher in trouble who tries to offer support for a student if they're technically not supposed to be in that class, right? So, I and a couple of teachers recently got not quite written up, but basically like a verbal warning. And we're like, look, like, so the students come by, they just need a break because, to be honest, some of the teachers are freaking assholes. So, so it's just like, just kind of thinking about how that is just very present, and the monitoring of the bathrooms as well is there. And I teach at a school called Maya Angelou. Like, come on, y'all, like really. So yeah, I just wanted to quickly share that, but that's something I'm experiencing, that pressure from my admin as a teacher, and it's fucked up because I'm not trying to surveil my students' bathroom use if they take 7 or 8 minutes. I mean, so yeah, that was just something I wanted to share.
Yes, awesome. Thank you, Nadia. Anything else? Any questions about the internship? Cool. All right, cool. And yeah, like I said, we've kind of been doing this work, talking to other high schoolers as well, and then working with those youth at STEAM to the future. So we can, if folks have any questions, or if you're an educator and you want to learn more about that, you can email us and we'd be happy to get in touch. And so, yeah, Akhil again had talked to these students about the surveillance programs, these, behavioral surveillance programs, risk assessment programs, PATH, and whatnot going on in schools. And one of the other things they talked about was a new reporting app called LASAR, LASAR. And so maybe, Akhil, if you wouldn't mind, I could pass it to you to fill folks in on that.
Hi, everyone. I just put the name of the app in the chat. Again, my name is Akhil with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. And yeah, the kids were pretty taken aback by this app, which luckily hadn't made it to Fairfax High yet in 100%. Thank you, Brother Pancake. It hadn't made it to the school in terms of, they hadn't heard of this app yet, but we do know that they're planning on rolling this app out across LA. And basically what this app is an anonymous reporting app that encourages kids, staff, and teachers all to report on suspicious behavior. And we fully anticipate that this will disproportionately target Black youth. And how do we know that? It's because, first of all, this app has been done in the name of school safety, drug use, school shootings, all these various things. And it's part of a long line of stuff that's similar to that: metal detectors, random searches, all these various things. Dogs, we hear about dogs in schools, cameras, and all these things have consistently always targeted Black youth. And then not only that, but we have qualitative evidence, because this app is based off of a larger program called the See Something, Say Something Suspicious Activity Reporting Program. If any of you have seen that phrase around see something, say something, it comes from this national program that was basically created in the wake of 9/11 under the idea that if everybody is constantly surveilling for terrorist activity or criminal activity that, and specifically behaviors indicative that somebody might be planning that activity. And if the reports of people who were suspicious made it into the hands of police, and if all the police had access to it, they could potentially stop these attacks. Of course, we know that that's not the real goal. The real goal is and has always been criminalization. But what ends up happening with these programs is when somebody reports on somebody for a suspicious behavior, a secret file is created on that person. And this file exists permanently in a government spy center called a fusion center. And there are about 80 fusion centers around the country. We have one in LA County called the Joint Regional Intelligence Center. And basically it's just a drab building full of computers and hard drives, and it's staffed by the LA Sheriff's Department. And what this building is and what all these fusion centers are, they're basically mini spy hubs where it connects all these different police agencies, and they get all this data, they get all this surveillance data from different law enforcement agencies, and then they crunch the numbers and decide who the police should target. They do risk assessments, and they also allow departments that claim that they're not talking to each other, for example, the police and ICE, in a so-called sanctuary city. The fusion center, it basically is like that person in the middle of a game of telephone where they're sending messages back and forth between different departments. So going back to the suspicious activity reporting program, whenever you make a report of a suspicious behavior, it goes to that fusion center and then it goes back out to law enforcement agencies, and cops can see when they pull you over that somebody else had started this file on you. And basically what this does is it starts a whole trajectory of that person being targeted more and more and more and more viciously, with the goal of ultimately, either killing, deporting, or jailing. And we know, based on the fact that we forced the city to do an audit of the suspicious activity reporting program, and we did a people's audit of it, and we found that Black people were vastly disproportionately represented among these suspicious activity reports. And among the reports that were specifically labeled as women, Black people were as much as 50% of the women that were labeled as suspicious. More than that, these reports were very often in white or richer neighborhoods, meaning that the behavior that was deemed suspicious was just Black existence in that neighborhood. So fast forward to this app and to the LAPD PATH program, as we said earlier. The LAPD PATH program, it claims in its grant application to get the money to fund it, it claims that the suspicious activity reporting program was a huge success. And we know, because we've gotten their training materials from when they're training teachers and counselors and law enforcement, they are basically training them in making suspicious activity reports. That's what the goal is to train, because we know we've organized against this program, and the number of suspicious activity reports has dwindled radically from when the program started till now. So now they're basically trying to jumpstart it. And they're trying to involve kids. They're trying to deputize kids as reporters on each other through this app. And the moment you download this app, if you have the stomach for it, basically the first thing you see is that it basically gives you a box to label what kind of activity you see. And then you put a geographical location, and then you can write a description. And one of the boxes literally is just suspicious behavior. All of this is under a framework called behavioral surveillance. And behavioral surveillance is basically this broad idea that somebody's behaviors now are indicative of behaviors that they might thinking about planning to do in the future. It actually, we don't know all the details of this. So the question in the chat is, does the app itself collect data on the reporter? We do know that if you have the app, you can mark whether you want to make the report anonymous or give your information, but we don't know if it collects data regardless of if you mark anonymous. Or does anonymous just mean that, you know, the law enforcement agencies won't use your name, but they still know it? Or does anonymous just mean that the data provider knows your information, but the police don't? Or, you know, like, we actually have no idea what exactly anonymous means. So that's a really good question. But we do know that the moment you make a report, it supposedly goes to the LA school police and to the LAPD. And there's a separate app that is specifically for LAUSD staff only, meaning teachers and counselors and administrators, to report on youth as well. And even though you can download that app, it prevents you from using it unless you have LAUSD credentials. So there are these parallel apps that they're trying to put out there. And it's very dangerous. So we're trying to raise the alarm on it. And it's really interesting, some of the concerns that the kids themselves gave when we talked to them about this app, because they brought in dynamics that adults may not be thinking about. For example, the potential for this app to be, I was going to say abused, but the point is, even the correct usage is something that we oppose. But the point is that there's a potential for the app to be abused for cyberbullying. So the kids talked about what happens if, you know, there's a friend group that doesn't like another kid and they mass report that kid. Or what happens if one person is able to make a whole bunch of fake profiles and submit a whole bunch of different suspicious activity reports on one person. And the way it can be used for something similar to, you know, swatting, you know, or something similar to, you know, trying to like send law enforcement, sick law enforcement on somebody. So these are some of the various concerns we're raising. And one thing that we would really like to do is get community feedback in creating talking points on what are the reasons that you would oppose this app, what are the concerns you have about this app. Matios, do you think we should take some right now, or do you think that, also I see Nadia's hand. Did you have a question, Nadia?
Yeah, we can absolutely take some now. I want to give Nadia
Sorry,
the.
that was from earlier.
Okay.
But I will, I mean, I was from earlier, but yeah, I mean, definitely, there's just so many concerns. I'm concerned is when my school announces that, yeah, what we'll have to do about that. But yeah, my hand was up from earlier. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'll be down to take some notes down if folks have any.
Okay. So I think that everybody has the ability to unmute. We would love to hear thoughts. If you have like a question about the app in terms of research questions that we could use to create public records requests, or if you have something that, you know, bothers you or disturbs you about the app, you know, we would love to talk about, you know, what are some talking points we should use, just general thoughts about the app based on what you've heard. Okay, I see Rebecca.
Hey, thank you for answering my earlier question. I spend a lot of time thinking about like digital security and just kind of like if I ever have to download an app onto my phone, I'm just like, okay, like what are the developers getting from this? Like what kind of data is this collecting on me? Like, does it have access to my phone or my microphone? And it's like, I can't imagine that a reporting app like that would have too many things to collect, but I don't know. I was just curious. And then also just like thinking of how like, I don't know if it's possible to like figure out who's developing the app, because then like, I don't know, it just seems like there would be a lot of information there, and then kind of like, are they impartial to helping develop these kinds of things for the state? Like, is their work replicated in like other spaces? I would be curious to know that. And then two, I just wanted to voice that I really liked that just like engaging with the youth, like they do bring up like a lot of points. Like I think like on social media over the years that we've seen, like the people who are attacked the most are like Black women, trans women, like people of color. Like it's like I have a hard time not imagining that an app like this would kind of replicate all those dynamics that we've seen on social media over the last decade. And yeah, especially with cyberbullying and yeah, all these things always get weaponized against like the most marginalized kids and maybe their families. Like it just seems really dangerous in a lot of ways. But yeah.
Like your some of the talking points around it'll replicate dynamics we've already seen on social media. It can be used for cyberbullying, both of which will target the most marginalized youth. And then questions are who is developing the app and what information is gathered on the person who reports. By the way, just a quick thing, I don't know the person or the company that develops the app, but I know that in the App Store where it lists the developer or lists the, who sells the app because it's free, but it's, it just says LAUSD. I mean, it says the LA School District. Other questions, thoughts, concerns, talking point ideas? I see Chella's unmuted. Chella, did you have any thoughts?
Oh no, that was an accident,
Oh,
to
no,
be honest. Sorry.
no problem. We have one in the chat. I wonder if that means they contract an organization externally or have internal resources. I would love to hear if there are teachers or counselors or people who just work with youth in schools right now, how you feel like the app would impact your school environment. Also, if you've like been told about the app or if you've heard about that in any way already too. If there are any teachers or social workers or counselors in the meeting right now. There, I don't think there is then. We can go back to Matthew, but I just want to quickly throw out a couple other things that are related to this that I have personally seen or heard of. And the memories are just coming to me right now because it's been a couple years since I thought of this. But my first, like a couple years ago, my first year of teaching in nonprofits, the nonprofit I was teaching was doing music classes for it was a after school program at a charter school that was part of LAUSD, but it had sort of its like own independent thing. And I remember that one of the things that they wanted us to do, which both the two of us who worked for this nonprofit who were at that school, we refused to do this and they kind of like ended up dropping it. But they wanted us to use this platform, this app, to basically grade the kids' behavior in class based on how often they raised their hand and talked and how often they disrupted or various things like that, and that the administrators would see that as well. And I kind of wonder, just based on that memory, if they plan on eventually building out this app and having it be, like required as part of what the teachers do, and like basically folding in discipline and other things into that. The other thing I wanted to quickly say is that this this isn't the first time they've tried this, LAUSD, in terms of specifically a suspicious behavior app. They've been talking about this for a little while. And this app, if you look at the App Store, it has a version history that's a little bit older than when they started announcing it publicly. And that's this one specific app, but there's another app that I don't think it really took off, but it was part of the Preventing Violent Extremism program that we mentioned earlier. So Simon Wiesenthal Center, which again runs the Museum of Tolerance here in LA, they got a grant from the state of California to do Preventing Violent Extremism curriculum in LA schools. And part of what they were trying to do is trying to promote an app that they made called Combat Hate. And it similarly encourages kids to report instances of hate that they, or a hate incident or a hate crime. Hate incidents are supposedly things that are not even crimes, but the kid still is encouraged to report it. And that might sound benign in the sense that, you know, we oppose hate, but it depends on how hate is defined and who is defining it. So Simon Wiesenthal Center, the same people who ran that program were the curators. There's this one person specifically, Rick Eaton. He was a staffer at the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and he curates an online blacklist of organizations that are called digital hate and terrorism. And he lists multiple organizations that are organizing for Palestine as examples of hate and terrorism. He lists Chants Against the Police as examples of hate and terrorism, and Palestinian solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement as an example of hate and terrorism, among other things. So we see that, and they do list Nazis, but the point is that they're conflating these two. So this has been in the works for a while, but that app that was encouraging kids to report hate doesn't seem to have taken off. It doesn't seem like it, but they're trying now to use this app on suspicious behavior. So we're, it's all hands on deck to organize against it. Back to Matias, I guess.
Yeah, thanks so much, Akil. And if folks have any questions about the LASAR app or want to plug in with our escalating outreach and organizing against that, you can email us at stoplapdspying@gmail.com. I'll type it in the chat. And I think that's all we've got on the agenda. One thing I did want to bring up that was touched on during last week's gender and sexuality meeting was a bill that's being introduced in the state of California to effectively turn teachers into, it forces teachers to report on if students identify as transgender. And so this is something a lot of folks didn't expect to see in California. It was introduced by two Republican assembly members. Yeah, assembly members. And it's called AB 1314. And so what it mandates is that school employees, teachers, counselors, the same kinds of groups that we've been talking about for the entirety of this meeting, would be deputized by the state and have to notify a parent that their child is publicly identifying as transgender within 3 days from the date they become aware. And so, yeah, I can share this article on it, but it does cite a survey from the Trevor Project that shows that this is incredibly dangerous, just because, this survey shows that 32% of trans and non-binary students consider their home a gender affirming place, which is a really low number, whereas 51% of trans and non-binary students found school to be a gender affirming place. So, we have these spaces that statistically have been safer havens for this type of expression being criminalized and threatened by the state. And so I'd just be curious to hear, and I want to thank Chella and everybody who brought it up during last week's gender and sexuality meeting, just because this is something we need to be tackling. But I want to hear if anybody else has heard about this, any immediate thoughts and concerns. Obviously, it's concerning and alarming. And it's something we want to talk about more, but I just wanted to introduce it to the conversation.
One thing that I am thinking of is that that recent kind of announcement by the Biden administration that they're allowing some versions of like discriminating against trans people for sports teams or something like that. And I'm just kind of sensing a large scale, I mean, it's not like Democratic Party ever has, like cared. It's always been a sham in that sense, but I feel like there's a large scale tack to the right in advance of the election, and I am sensing it's the fact that it's happening in California now, that's just some of my thoughts.
Awesome. Okay, well. Oh, yes, Charles, please jump in.
So y'all, hey again. I'm drinking right now. I'm gonna keep it honest. Today I fell into a hole of like right wing, like stuff on YouTube, and I guess in Chino, I don't know where that is though, but that is California. It was a mom was like her quote unquote daughter fell into transgenderism by by confessing to her teacher that she was trans, that she felt trans, and like literally it just sent like a wave of parents that was just like, this is not right, this is not what we are standing here for. And of course they're predominantly white, I'm not it's the funniest thing is though, something I named in gender and sexuality last week is that literally with these 14 laws that are like coming out to ban drag shows and transness, literally some of them some of the family some of the groups that are banding together with like Christian groups are banding together with Muslim groups, which is like, they will talk shit about Muslims any other day, but right now we are number one on their target list. I just wanted to put that out there and let y'all know that this thing is really serious. And yeah, I mean, I'm scared. I'm not gonna sit here and lie. But yeah, that's where I just wanted to say. Lower my hand.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that, Charles. Appreciate you. Any other comments or questions from folks? Okay, well, cool. Yeah, we're gonna continue talking about this and we're gonna ramp up the fight for sure. And so yeah, folks should email us at stop@gmail.com if you want to get plugged in with this or anything else we've talked about. And if you know any educators, if you are an educator and you have a class you want us to speak to, we're more than happy to make the time to do that. Again, yeah, just hit us up, and we'll be there. I want to use this last bit of time to talk about some announcements we have for the upcoming week. Unless Akil or Nadia, was there anything else you wanted to plug in before we made room for announcements?
I don't think of anything. Oh, just if you wanted to join our work, just so you know, we used to have our regular meetings on the third Wednesday of the month, but since we've been teaching this whole winter and spring on Wednesdays, we have our regular meetings every first and third Thursday at 5 p.m. It's every first and third Thursday at 5 p.m. for the War on Youth group. So if you're interested in joining the fight, if you're interested in helping with research, in helping craft pop ed, in helping to plan curriculum for youth, a variety of really fun stuff, you can email the coalition's email, stoplapdspying@gmail.com, and we can get you the Zoom link, or we can send the Zoom event, so that or the Google Calendar event or whatever. So yeah, again, that's the first and third Thursday at 5 p.m.
Yes, thank you so much, Akil. And yeah, you can hit us up to join any of our other fights too. So yeah, like I said, we've been working with these first through sixth graders, well, specifically fourth through sixth graders this past few weeks from STEAM to the Future. And we're actually exhibiting some of the incredible work they've been doing at UCLA Law this Saturday. So I dropped the link over here. We're doing a little workshop and panel with the folks who put this together. Akil, Nadia, and myself will be there. And these dope kids will be there showing off some really cool abolitionist art. Yes, I believe it's the 15th. Right? But yeah, it's in the link over there. And then, yeah, so folks should come through if you're free on a Saturday morning. It's gonna be dope. Yeah, come check that out. If you've got little youngins in your life, bring them through too. There's gonna be interactive little exercises they can join in on. So that's that link over there, and we hope folks can join. Other than that, I think that's it for announcements, unless folks want to jump in with any other community announcements. Oh, one more thing, we're also going to be, so we've been door knocking on the weekends for against this robot dog that city council is going to vote on May 5th or earlier. So if you want to do some door knocking, we've been hitting Koreatown, plans to hit Lamert in the upcoming weeks. You can also hit that same email. This week, we're going to be going out on Saturday at 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon. And that'll be likely in the Koreatown area. So you can just shoot. I'll put my personal email there, and if folks are interested, I can add you to a Signal group. Any other announcements from folks? Okay. Thanks so much, folks, for plugging in. We appreciate you. Thank you for joining the fight. We look forward to continuing on in the work to dismantle policing. Everyone be safe. Take care. See you all soon.